Welcome, gentle listener. Tonight, we journey into the shadowed world of the medieval midwife, a woman standing at the raw edge of life and death, caught between healing hands, ancient superstitions, and the weight of a watchful church. As the candles flicker and the night deepens, let this immersive story carry you through the struggles, triumphs, and heartbreaks of a life lived in service to birth and loss. If this journey soothes you, remember to softly like, leave a thoughtful comment, and subscribe for more stories to help you rest. Breathe deeply now, and let sleep gently find you. You are not the first daughter born in your family, and you will not be the last. But from the moment your mother cries out in that small, smoky room, you begin to understand that every breath you take is borrowed. The wooden walls do not protect you from the cold or the sound of your mother screaming. Outside, snow falls in clumps, slow and soundless. Inside, the air is thick with the smell of sweat, iron, and burning tallow. A single candle flickers in the corner, the flame leaning toward you like it's reaching out to witness your birth. You do not remember this moment, of course. But it is where your story begins. A woman kneels between your mother's legs. Her hands are calloused, cracked, stained. Her voice is low, murmuring something to the saints, or maybe to your mother, or maybe to herself. The room is not quiet, but it is reverent. It is where blood meets prayer. And it is where you begin to live. They say you did not cry at first, that you came into the world with eyes wide open, blinking up at the rafters, like you recognized the shadows carved into the wood. They had to rub your chest with rough linen and blow warm air against your lips. Eventually, you made a sound small, croaking, angry. The kind of sound that demanded attention. The kind of sound that saved you. You are wrapped in old cloth, swaddled in the same rags that held your older brother. The fire has almost gone out, but someone adds a handful of kindling. The room sighs in orange light again, and you are passed from hand to hand, midwife, mother, midwife again. You are not named that night. Names wait for baptisms. But your eyes are noticed. Sharp, dark. A girl born with knowing eyes. You grow up in a house that smells of barley porridge, boiled wool, and damp stones. There are no windows, just slits that let in enough light to blur shadows. The floors are dirt, uneven, and cool beneath your bare feet. In spring, the rain makes rivers through the kitchen. In winter, frost creeps across the walls. The hearth is the center of everything cooking, warmth, stories, grief. You are not the clever one, not the pretty one, but you are the quiet one, and that matters. Quiet means listening. Quiet means watching. When your sister cries from fever, you sit beside her all night, dipping a cloth into stale water and placing it on her brow. You do not speak. You just stay. And when she finally breathes steady again, you notice how your mother looks at you. Not with pride. Not quite. But with recognition. She has seen that look before. There is a woman in the village who comes and goes without being seen. She does not sit at the tavern. She does not kneel in church unless summoned. But you see her sometimes at the edge of fields, by the stream, collecting things. Flowers, maybe. Or roots, or secrets. The other children say she smells strange, that she mutters to herself, that her house has bones hanging in the windows. You are afraid of her, until you're not. It happens quietly. Your cousin is in labor, and something goes wrong. There is panic. Running. A knock at the midwife's door. You are told to stay home, but you don't. You follow the sound of crying through the snow, barefoot, ignoring the sting of frost in your toes. You slip inside the house just as she's arriving. She sees you. You think she'll scold you, but she doesn't. She simply nods. "Hold that," she says, handing you a basin. You hold it. You do not look away when the blood comes. When your cousin screams and begs and curses, you do not flinch when the baby slides out quiet and too blue. The midwife curses under her breath, rubs its back, breathes into its mouth, shakes it not gently. And then, finally, it wails. A sharp, slicing sound that makes everyone cry with relief. You're still holding the basin. "You'll do," the midwife says as she cleans up. You don't know what she means, not yet. But you carry that sentence with you for days, weeks. A name unspoken, but branded on your soul. There are no apprenticeships, no certificates, just repetition, observation. Sometimes you sit beside her in silence, grinding herbs. Other times she lets you watch births from the shadows. Each one is different. Some are short, like laughter. Others are long, like grief. Some women sing through the pain. Others curse God and their husbands. Some stay silent and bleed too much. You learn not to ask too many questions. Not aloud, anyway. The answers come slowly, in the smell of marjoram, in the way she ties knots in string to measure contractions, in the ritual of warming blankets by the fire and laying them out with care. You learn that water breaks with a sound like betrayal, that sometimes babies come with the cord wrapped around their neck like a noose. That silence is the worst sound of all. Your hands grow rough. You develop a tolerance for blood, for smell, for fear. And somewhere along the way, you begin to realize this is not just a duty, not just a job. This is a tether, a calling, an inheritor. Once, you are still a girl. You still bleed and laugh and dream about boys who smile at you at the market. But your dreams are quieter now. Less of a future, more of a question. Will this be me? Will I be the one they call at midnight? Will I be the one who kneels at the edge of someone's pain and doesn't look away? And eventually, the answer comes. Yes, you will be her. You enter womanhood through the same narrow door your mothers died on, lined with blood and fire. Not ablaze. Just a single candle, always flickering. The midwife hands you her tools, though none of them have names. A cloth, a bone needle, a pouch of dried roots. A silence that listens. You're ready, she says. You don't feel ready, but you nod anyway. Because in this world, no one waits for readiness. Only for the knock on the door in the dark. And now, that knock is for you. You don't remember the first time you delivered a child. Not because it wasn't important, but because it wasn't one moment. It was hundreds. A blur of linen and cries, of warm blood and whispered prayers. It was the slow erosion of girlhood, chipped away by every contraction you counted, every brow you wiped, every breath you held for too long. You are called by word of mouth, or sometimes by a knock on the door before dawn. The knocks always sound different. Some are sharp, urgent, and terrified. Others are slow, uncertain, as if the caller doesn't want to wake the house or fate. You always answer. Whether your knees ache or your hands tremble, you answer because it is no longer about you. There is no map, no manual, no comfort of diagrams and charts. Only the shapes of women's bodies, the feel of their skin, the sound of their breathing. You learn the rhythm of labour like a hymn. Slow at first, with space between the notes. Then faster, more painful, more desperate, until it crescendos in that one awful, beautiful moment of release when the baby slips into your palms and the world becomes quiet again. Your hands are your teachers. They learn before your mind does. They recognize when the baby is breech. They feel the difference between a pelvis ready to give and one clenched with fear. They memorize the soft skulls, the open mouths, the too small fingers. They know the temperature of death. At first, the blood frightens you. Not just the amount, but the way it arrives. In waves. In silence. Sometimes with no warning at all. A healthy woman, laughing and pushing and then suddenly pale, her pulse fluttering like a moth under your fingertips. You press rags into her, apply pressure, pray under your breath. You say you're doing everything you can. You don't say you're not sure what else to do. You remember every woman you couldn't save. Their faces visit you at night, eyes half-lidded, lips open as if to speak, but they never do. Instead, they stare. Not with blame. Just unfinished. You carry their silence with you. Not all births are full of sorrow. Some are loud and messy and hilarious. You've seen women yell curses so vile they make grown men blush. You've seen them fall asleep between contractions, then wake up and push like thunder. You've seen mothers kiss their newborns before they're full. Lie cleaned, weeping with laughter, with disbelief, with love so raw it hurts to watch. You start to recognize patterns. Not in how babies come into the world, but in how women carry themselves through it. The ones who've lost before are quieter. The young girls grip your wrist too tightly. The older ones breathe better. Sometimes. But the pain is always there. No one escapes it. Not even you. You are there when the girl from the next village arrives late and already leaking fluid. She doesn't look you in the eyes. You can smell the shame on her before she even speaks. Her parents didn't come with her. She lies down in your hut and turns her face to the wall. The baby comes quickly, silently, without joy. You don't ask questions. You bury the placenta. You clean her and send her back before sunrise. These are the stories you cannot tell. You learn herbs not from books, but from hands older than yours. You chew on bark to understand its bitterness. You rub lavender into your own temples to see if it calms the ache. You crush fennel seeds between stones and inhale the sharp scent that clears the nose. You learn which roots reduce fever, which flowers ease muscle cramps, which brews will bring on a late period when asked for in a trembling voice. You become fluent in the language of women's pain. When the pain is too much, you press warm cloths to aching backs. You whisper stories into their ear-souled stories, safe stories, stories about other births, other women, stronger women. Sometimes they smile through the pain. Sometimes they scream so loud it rattles your bones. No matter how loud they are, you are quieter. You wipe the sweat from their necks. You help them squat. You hold their thighs apart when they have no strength left. You catch the baby. You cut the cord. You listen for that first gasp, the cry that tells you the world has begun again. And then you stitch if you must. You wash. You swaddle. You hush. You comfort. You grieve. You are always the last to sleep. And still, there are days when you doubt yourself. When you walk home in wet shoes after a long night, and your hands won't stop shaking. When you see a child running through the village, and you think, I brought her into this world. What if I had failed? You carry that thought like a secret scar. People treat you differently now. Not better, just differently. They nod, but don't ask you how. You are. They speak kindly, but avoid meeting your eyes for too long. As if they know you've seen something they haven't. As if they fear it might be contagious. You begin to notice the rituals. The way some women bury something small in the yard after birth. The way they burn a lock of their baby's hair on the third day. The way they hang herbs above the door not for health, but for protection. Protection from what, you wonder? From the world? From spirits? From you? The candlelight becomes your most loyal companion. You work by its glow, hour after hour. You study the shadow your hand casts on the wall. You get used to the way everything flickers, nothing stable, everything soft around the edges. That's how your life feels now, never sharp, never clear. Just movement, heat, breathing. You realize, after a while, that you've stopped speaking during births. You used to murmur encouragements. Now you are still. You let your presence speak. Your stillness becomes the anchor. The mother's eyes find yours in the darkest moment. You do not flinch. You do not cry. You do not smile. You are there. Just there. And that is everything. You don't carry a satchel filled with polished instruments. You don't wear gloves. You have no silver scissors or gleaming forceps. What you have, what you've always had, are your hands. They are not dainty. Not the hands of a lady or of someone who has known comfort. Your nails are short and often chipped, cuticles cracked, skin toughened by lie and labour. But they are steady. And steady is what brings babies into this world. When you walk into a room. You bring a cloth bag. Inside, you carry strips of clean linen washed by hand, dried in the sun, sprinkled with herbs if you had the time. You carry a small pot of goose fat or oil to ease tearing. A dull knife, cleaned with boiling water. A length of twine. A candle. Maybe some dried lavender, wrapped in cloth. That's all. You don't need more. You are not here to impress. You are here to help a body do what it was made for, and sometimes what it fears it cannot. Your hands know how to touch. Not gently, always. Sometimes you must press hard. Sometimes you must push. Sometimes you must go inside slowly, carefully, praying under your breath. You do not like the way that feels. You never have. But there are times when it is the only thing that saves them. You remember the first tea. You had to turn a baby inside the womb. The mother was exhausted, her eyes half closed, murmuring her dead mother's name. The child was coming shoulder first. The midwife you trained under had died the winter before. There was no one else. You boiled your hands, said your prayers, lubricated your fingers with oil, and then you went in slow, breath by breath feeling, not with panic, but with memory. The way the bones bend, the way the small body should curl, and when the baby shifted just enough and slipped downward, you wept into your sleeve. Not from joy, from relief, from disbelief that it had worked. You don't get praise for these things. Not out loud. Maybe a nod. Maybe a hand pressed over yours at the end. But mostly, you are left alone to gather your cloth, wipe your hands, and walk back into the quiet. Your hands also heal. You've learned how to stitch a torn perineum with trembling thread. You've packed herbs into wounds, placed cool cloths on burning skin, held tiny wrists to feel for the flicker of life. You've washed dead infants too, laid them gently in a cloth bundle, kissed their foreheads because the mother could not. Sometimes you think your hands know too much. You don't work in clean spaces. There is no table, no metal basin, no sweet-smelling soap. The birthing beds are often straw-stuffed sacks or wooden benches. Sometimes it's just the ground, covered in a blanket. You kneel for hours, joints stiff, clothes soaked. You learn to ignore your own discomfort. The candle is always burning, sometimes two, never more. The light isn't just for sight. It is for ritual. For comfort, it flickers against the walls like a living thing. It makes the blood shine like rusted gold. It casts shadows across the baby's face when you lift them into the light for the first time. There's a moment there always that feels like blessing, as if light itself confirms the child's arrival. You don't speak of it, but you notice. You've tried to teach others. You show them how to wrap a baby tight, how to check for breath with a feather under the nostrils. You tell them how to heat the oil just enough, how to tell the difference between a pain that leads to birth and a pain that leads to death. They listen. Some nod. Some forget. You watch their hands. If their hands are unsure, you do not call them again. Your tools do not impress men. They see you come with your cloths, and think you are nothing. They hear of your work and scoff. But when their wives scream, when their daughters tremble, when their newborns do not breathe, they call for you. And your hands do the work no one else dares to do. They do not thank your hands. Not often, but you do. Quietly, sometimes at night, washing them in cool water by candlelight. You look at them, the small scars, the bent knuckles. You whisper to them, as one would to loyal beasts. Thank you. I know it is hard. I know you are tired. And they are. Your hands shake sometimes now. Not from fear, from age, from time. You wonder how long they will keep obeying you, how many more births they will carry through. But you don't say that out loud. Words are promises in your world. And you're not ready to promise he end. You remember a woman once asked you if you had ever counted how many babies you'd caught. You laughed. You didn't know. You didn't want to know. They blur together, but your hands remember. Each tiny shoulder, each soft skull, each slippery body pulled into the world. Your hands remember what your mind has released. Sometimes, after a birth, when the house is quiet and the baby is feeding, you sit by the fire and rub your fingers. You feel them twitch. They move as if still working, still remembering. You don't stop them. You let them go through the motions, as if some part of you has never left that moment, never stepped out of the circle of life and blood and breath. You wonder if anyone else notices how sacred this work is. They call it messy. They call it women's business. The why call it common. But you know the truth. Your tools are your hands. And they have brought more people into the world than any king, any priest, any soldier. You do not wear a cross around your neck, but you cross yourself before every birth. You do not speak Latin, but you know the weight of whispered prayers. You do not call yourself a healer. That word is dangerous. That word is political. That word could burn you alive. So you call yourself what they allow a midwife, a helper, a woman who serves. But you know that what you carry in your hands, in your body, in your memories, more powerful than any blessing muttered over bread and wine. And power makes the church nervous. They do not like that women listen to you, that they come to you before the priest, that they trust your herbs more than his words, that they whisper your name with gratitude in the dark, that they name you in their birth stories, not the saints. So they watch you. At first, it is subtle, a longer glance at the market, a question from a visiting friar about the contents of your satchel, a warning whispered by a friend, careful not to be overheard. Be careful, she says. They are talking. You nod. You've heard that before. You've seen what happens when talk turns to trial. It is not that the church forbids your work. Not exactly. They need you. Their wives need you. Their sisters. Their daughters. But they want to control it. Sanitize it. Christianize it. You are told to speak blessings during birth, to baptize infants quickly, to use only approved remedies. You nod. You smile. You do what you must. And then, in the quiet of your hut, you continue as you always have. Because the body does not care for dogma. Pain does not wait for permission. You whisper older word sounds your mother whispered, and her mother before her. Words that smell of earth and ash, not incense. You grind roots the church calls suspicious. You burn herbs to cleanse the air, not for the devil, but for the lungs. You tie knots in red string knot as spells, but as reminders of life, of breath, of time. Still, they grow more watchful. A priest comes to visit. He asks about a birth you attended, a stillbirth, a tragedy. You say little. You choose your words like picking herbs carefully with gloves. He watches your hands. He notices the stains. He asks if you prayed. Yes, you say. He asks to whom? To God. You answer. Because to say otherwise would be to confess. But you remember that night clearly. The mother had been bleeding for hours. You pressed rags between her legs, whispered into her ear, begged the baby to live, begged the mother to stay, begged whatever force was listening. The baby came out cold. The mother closed her eyes and never opened them again. You do not know if God heard you, but something did. The priest leaves, but not kindly. He reminds you to stay in your place, to remember who grants salvation, who writes history, who judges. You nod again, but inside your blood hums with defiance. Because you know this, when no one else is there, when the pain cracks a woman open, when death breathes down her neck, it is not the priest who holds her. It is you. You remember a time when the church praised midwives. Long ago, before the fires, when your work was seen as holy, when childbirth was a sacred mystery, and those who guided it were honoured. That time is gone, replaced by fear, by suspicion, by sermons that warn against wise women and dark arts. You learn to work quietly. You stop chanting aloud. You do not display your dried herbs in the window anymore. You tuck your knowledge deep behind your ribs where no one can accuse it. But it's still there. It burns softly. You know women who have disappeared. Midwives accused of sorcery, of causing miscarriages, of stealing babies. You know their faces. You remember their laughter, their skill, their stories. All gone now, buried beneath fear and fire. You tend to your neighbours with care. You keep your he-dee bowed in church. You thank the priest when he visits, even though your stomach knots. But at night, you light a candle and sit beside the fire, fingers moving through herb bundles, through stories, through memories of women you've saved. You are not a witch, but you understand why they call you one. You know too much, and you know how to survive. The church writes its records in ink. You write yours in blood and breath. You remember each woman's name not in ledgers, but in the tilt of their heads, the shape of their cries, the way their hands gripped yours in the final push. You think of Mary, not the Holy One, but the girl in the cottage near the woods. She birthed alone before you arrived. The baby was still. She buried him beneath a tree, wrapped in linen and rosemary. They found he. They blamed her. They burned her. You visited her grave, left a flower, said nothing, because saying something would be dangerous. And you still have work to do. Still, you wonder, how long before they come for you? You keep your pouch hidden beneath your skirts now. You carry fewer herbs when traveling. You teach your apprentice to smile, to nod, to stay silent. You warn her, never speak of dreams, of visions, of healing beyond the flesh, even if it helps. Especially if it helps, because the church does not like women who heal. They prefer women who pray. You still pray, but not always with words. Sometimes with hands. Sometimes with water. Sometimes with hope. Hope is not a sin, but sometimes it feels like one. You listen to the priest's sermons. You nod when he speaks of Eve's punishment, how birth is suffering, how pain is holy, how death is earned. You watch the women around you lower their eyes. You see their shoulders tighten. You see how they carry the weight of guilt in their wombs. You do not agree, but you say nothing, because you must survive to serve. And you serve not only the body, but the soul. Not the soul the church writes about, but the one you see flicker behind a mother's eyes when her baby cries for the first time. That soul, that light, that is what you protect. You are not their enemy. You are not a witch. You are not a heretic. You are a midwife. And that, to them, is threat enough. You know what they say. That every scream, every torn muscle, every drop of blood shed in childbirth is God's justice. That women suffer because Eve reached for 3. Apple. That birth pain is a punishment, not a misfortune, not a challenge, but a sentence passed down through generations. And yet, when a woman clutches your wrist and begs you to make it stop, you do not see sin. You see survival. You see a body cracking open to create life, and you do not hear the voice of a punishing God. You hear the oldest song in the world roar, ancient, holy. But you do not say that aloud, because pain, to them, is proof of virtue. The more she cries, the more she is redeemed. The more she bleeds, the more she is forgiven. The more she suffers, the more she resembles the Virgin. And if she dies well, then she is a martyr, a vessel emptied in service of life. You have tried to ease the pain. You've brewed teas that soften the muscles. You've warmed oils to rub into tense thighs. You've guided breath, whispered calming words, rubbed backs in circular motions like drawing invisible prayers into the skin. But some watch you do these things and shake their heads. They say, let her suffer. It is her place. They say, if it is God's will, let it be done. You've heard those words as a woman sobs, biting her own hand to keep from screaming. You've heard them as a girl too young to be called a mother begs for her dead mother's name. You've heard them while holding pressure to a womb that will not stop bleeding, while a priest mumbles useless prayers in the corner, safe in his clean robe. And you wonder what kind of God demands this. You've sat with women in silence through the long hours of labor. No screams. No tears. Just clenched jaws, white knuckle. The occasional gasp. They have heard the same sermons. They believe in silence, in obedience, in pain as a gift. You do not challenge their faith, but you still wrap warm cloths around their bellies. You still slip herbs into their tea. You still whisper stories into their ears when the contractions come like storms. Because pain may be holy, but it is also cruel. And you are not here to serve cruelty. Still, the weight of that belief hangs heavy in every room. It makes the air dense. It makes the women feel watched, even when they are alone. It shames them when they cry out. It silences them when they are afraid. You try to break through it with gentleness, with presence, with touch. Sometimes you succeed. Sometimes a woman lets herself sob into your shoulder, clutch your handy, curse the heavens. And afterward, she apologizes. "I'm sorry," she whispers. "I was weak," and you shake your head. You tell her she was brave, because she was. But the world doesn't want her to believe that. You remember your first time in that kind of room, the kind where silence isn't peace, but performance. The woman was noble, rich. She had servants. A priest at her bedside. Her husband pacing outside. She labored for hours, lips pressed shut, face pale, sweat rolling down her temples like rain. You offered her water. She refused. You suggested she move, squat, shift her hips. The priest frowned. "She will do as God intended," he said. And you wanted to scream. Because God did not intend for this. No God worth naming would. The baby came slowly. Too slowly. You saw the signs show. Shoulders stuck. Heartbeat slowing. You begged to help. To adjust her position. To intervene. They refused. And when the baby came, it did not cry. And the mother finally did. You washed your hands in silence, trembling with fury. You went home and sat by the fire and let yourself weep for her, for all the women who suffer not just from pain, but from the cruelty of being told they deserve it. You never forgot her face. Since then, you've learned to work in small rebellions. You lace the tea with extra valerian, even when no one asks. You warm the birthing stone and place it under the mother's back. You tell her stories about strong women, about grandmothers who birthed under moonlight and laughed afterward. You place a hand on her heart and say, "You are not being punished. You are giving Arth. There is a difference. Some believe you. Some do not. But all of them listen. You've heard men ask, "Why do women cry so much in labor?" And you want to answer, "Because no one has ever told them it's allowed." You've seen pain shape a woman's face into something primal, something ancient. You've seen her scream, not just from agony, but from centuries of silence cracking open inside her. You've seen her break and then rebuild, breath by breath. You know now that pain does not make you holy. It makes you real. And that is enough. You try to teach your apprentice the same. She asks, "Should I pray?" And you say, "If it helps, yes." She asks, "Should I offer herbs?" You say, "If it helps, yes." She asks, "What if they don't want help?" And you say, "Then sit beside them. Hold their hand. Be there, even when the world tells you not to be, because presence is resistance. You do not have the power to change the doctrine. You cannot rewrite the scriptures. But you can be there when a woman looks into your eyes, terrified, and sees not judgment, but understanding. You can be the only one in the room who does not ask her to suffer in silence. And sometimes that is enough. At night, you think about pain. How it shapes the world. How it becomes tradition. How it becomes law. You wonder if it will ever change. But for now, you focus on the next birth, the next cry, the next hand reaching for yours. And when the pain comes, as it always does, you meet it not with fear, not with doctrine, but with hands steady and heart open. Because pain may be a part of birth, but it is not the purpose of it. And that difference matters more than anyone dares to admit. It is quiet when it happens. Not the kind of quiet that means peace, but the kind that feels like a held breath. The kind that stretches too long. You are crouched at the end of the bed. Your hands are red. Your arms ache. The baby has not cried. The mother's chest rises slowly, too slowly. Her eyes flutter open for a second, then close. You feel a shift in the room. The moment where life tilts, unbalanced. And you know you are going to be blamed. You always are. If the birth is smooth, the credit goes to God, to good fortune, to the mother's strength. If something goes wrong, it's your fault. You didn't act fast enough. You touched something wrong. You used the wrong herb. You didn't pray the right why. You didn't stop what couldn't be stopped. You are never the miracle. You are always the mistake. You sit in silence as the father screams, as the mother's sister weeps, as someone spits in the corner and says, "She brought this," they mean you. They don't ask how long you stayed, how many times you whispered comfort, how you worked through blood and bile and fear, how your own knees gave out, how your voice cracked from saying, "Push, push, one more time, you can do this." They don't ask because they don't want to know. Blame is easier than truth. You gather your things. You clean the room. You avoid their eyes. You leave through the back, like a shadow. You walk home through the dark, feet dragging, your skin cold, your mind replaying every second what you did, what you missed. Wah. Tea, you should have known. You go over it again and again until even your breathing feels like guilt. The worst part is, You wonder if they're right. There is no book to consult, no one to debrief with. You sit by your fire, staring at your hands. The same hands that caught living babies now feel like tools of death. You weep quietly, because loud grief might be heard. And if they hear it, they'll say, "She cries because she knows she's guilty." So you cry like a secret. It does not happen often, but it happens enough. And every time it does, it tears something from you. You remember all their faces, not the ones who lived those blur over time, replaced by new ones, but the ones who died, those stay. You remember the woman who labored for 3 days, her lips cracked, her voice gone. Our eyes staring at the ceiling. You tried everything, shifted her hips, applied heat, called for help. Nothing worked. She died with your hand in hers. You remember the child who slipped out silent, cord wrapped twice around his neck. You tried to breathe for him. You begged him to cry. He never did. And you remember the accusations that followed. She did something wrong. Why didn't she save him? Why didn't she know? You always know. You know the weight of blame, like a cloak that never comes off. Sometimes they come to your door days later, with questions, with anger, with fire in their voices. They demand explanations you don't have. They want confessions. They want apologies. You give what you can. You say, "I'm sorry." You say, "I did everything." You say, "It wasn't enough." And still, they walk away bitter. Sometimes they don't come at all. Just stop calling. Stop nodding. Cross themselves when they see you. The silence cuts deeper than the shouting. You wonder, sometimes, if they forget what you are. That you are not a god. Not a magician. Not an angel. Just a woman. A tired, bruised, aching woman with no weapons but cloth and warmth and hands that try. But they don't want that version of you. They want someone to blame. And so, you take it. Again, and again, and again. Not because you deserve it, but because if you stop, who else will come when the next woman cries out in the night? You've thought about stopping. You've stared at your folded cloths and thought, no more. But then someone knocks. Always. A girl in pain. A mother in need. A life hanging by a thread. And you answer, always. You walk back into the room, into the blood, into the uncertainty, into the knowing that if anything goes wrong, it will be your fault again. You do it anyway. Because blame is a heavy thing, but not as heavy as a child dying alone. You tell your apprentice the truth one night when she asks if it ever gets easier. You shake your head. No, you say. It just becomes familiar. She asks, what if I fail? And you say, you will. She looks afraid. She should be. But then you take her hand and say, you'll also save more than you lose. And they'll never thank you for it. That's the truth. No songs are written for the ones who held death at bay. Only whispers. Only half-remembered names. Sometimes, a woman you helped years ago passes you in the ma. Riket. Her child runs ahead of her, laughing. She looks at you with something like reverence. But she doesn't speak. You nod. She nods. The moment passes. That's all you get. That's all you need. Because despite the blame, despite the fear, despite the nights you cannot sleep, you know that you are necessary. And even if they don't say it, even if they forget it, you remember. Your body remembers more than your mind does. Not in stories, not in words, but in the quiet ways it aches, shifts, hesitates. It becomes a map of every moment you lived through, every birth you assisted, every night you went home, soaked in blood and bone-tired. You do not need a calendar to know how many years have passed. Your back tells you. It groans in the morning when you rise. Your knees creak from 2. Many hours spent kneeling on dirt floors, bracing yourself against gravity, against death. Your wrists ache when you lift a pot. Your fingers are stiff before noon. No one else sees it. To the world, you are still the midwife. Still strong. Still capable. Still the one they call in the darkest hour. And you answer because you have to. Because you were taught that the moment you stop, the knowledge stops with you. That your body knows the truth. You're growing older. Not old, but older than you were when this began. You used to rise with ease. Now you sit longer at the hearth. You used to walk briskly to births. Now you limp the last few steps. You used to work all night and still light the fire at dawn. Now you rest your head on your arms and sleep sitting up just for a moment, because TH is no choice. You used to bleed like clockwork. Now your cycle skips, dances, disappears for months, then returns like a ghost. The signs are familiar. You've helped other women through this. But when it happens to you, it feels like a betrayal. Not because you wish for more children. You never had the time. But because your body is the thing you trusted most. And now it hums with change. You examine yourself the way you examine others. Fingers pressing here, testing there, watching your breath, your sleep, your skin. You become your own patient. But there is no one to treat you. Sometimes, late at night, you lie on your side and trace the lines of your palms with your thumb. The calluses, the scars, the places where skin has grown thick from years of use. You wonder what someone would. See if they read your hands like a book. What would they learn? Would they know the stories your back holds? The grief in your shoulders? The compassion in your fingertips? The guilt in your knuckles? Would they know you never stop? Even when your ribs ache from coughing, even when the frost gets in your bones, even when your feet swell from walking miles to reach a labouring woman alone in the woods. You never stop, because your body is more than a tool, it is a witness. It has felt every shiver of fear from a young mother. It has absorbed the screams, the silences, the prayers. It has cradled slippery newborns and bleeding placentas. It has held grieving husbands and soothed trembling sisters. You are made of memory. There is no book with all that you know. There is no parchment that records what you've learned with your palms, your ears, your eyes. Your body is your record, your legacy, your library, and it is wearing thin. You don't complain. There's no one to complain to. Your apprentice notices, sometimes. She offers to carry the satchel, to go in your place. You let her, once or twice, but when it matters, when the signs are strange, when something doesn't feel right, you still go. Because you know things she doesn't, things she can't yet feel in her bones. You try to pass on what you can. You show her how to breathe through her own pain so she can be calm in someone else's. You let her feel the rhythm of contractions through her own hands. You tell her what herbs to take when her monthly bleeding is too strong, too painful, too late. But there are some things you cannot teach. Like how it feels to kneel beside a woman whose body is giving up while your own back screams in protest. How it feels to wipe blood from your hands and realize it's not just theirs, it's yours. How it feels to keep moving, keep helping, even when your body begs you to stop. Because you know the truth, no one is coming to save you. You are the one who saves. You tend to yourself in the same way you tend to others. You boil water for your feet. You press warm cloths against your own belly. You chew bitter herbs for sleep. You soak your hands in lavender and salt. You rest when you can, but not often. You are always waiting for the knock. Your dreams have changed. Once they were vivid babies crying, women screaming, voices calling your name. Now your dreams are quiet. Tea. A candle burning low. A door left ajar. An empty cradle. Sometimes you dream of yourself, younger, walking through fields with a satchel swinging at your side. Sometimes you dream of your own birth. Your body speaks to you in these dreams. In pain, in warmth, in exhaustion. It reminds you that you are not endless. And still, when someone calls you rise, you wonder how long that will last. How long your legs will carry you. How long your fingers will feel life. How long your spine will straighten under the weight of birth. You do not know. But until that day comes, you go. Because this body-bent, tired, scarred is not just yours. It belongs to all the women you've helped, all the babies you've caught, all the lives you've held between your palms. And even as it wears down, even as it frays at the edges, it still serves. It still answers. It still knows what to do. Because your body is not just a vessel. It is the text of your life. And though no one will read it, you know every line by heart. You don't sleep easily anymore. Even when the night is quiet, even when your body is limp with exhaustion, even when the hearth still glows with amber light and your blanket smells of lavender, you cannot truly rest. Because your mind has its own hours, and in the dark, it opens doors. The dreams come slowly at first. A flash of blood. A scream you didn't hear in time. A baby who never cries. You wake with your jaw clenched, your arms wrapped tight around yourself, as if you're holding something that isn't there anymore. Sometimes you wake up kneeling, hands outstretched, fingers twitching us, though your body kept working while your spirit tried to rest. You know these aren't just dreams. They are memories, distorted and sharpened by guilt. You don't talk about them. Who would you tell? People want midwives to be strong, stoic, reliable. They want your hands to be steady, your voice calm, your soul quiet. They don't want to know what happens after you leave the birth room and sit on your floor, shaking, unable to breathe. But the nightmares come anyway. You dream of breathless babies, of women calling your name and vanishing into darkness, of rooms filled with blood that rise to your knees, to your waist, to your chin. You dream that your hands are stained red and no water can clean them. You dream of fire, of ropes, of faces twisted in accusation. You wake with your mouth open in a silent scream. And then you start the day. Because what choice do you have? There's always another knock. Another life depending on your tired hands. And you answer, always. Because that's what you do. Because if you don't, who will? But the weight builds. The moments you couldn't save. The cries you couldn't stop. The fear in a young girl's eyes when you tell her the baby hasn't turned. The way silence falls in a room when everyone knows, but no one says it's too late. You carry them, not like burdens, like ghosts. They walk beside you in the fields. They sit with you at supper. They press against your back in the cold. They whisper when you close your eyes. You try to fight them off with rituals. Lavender bundles above the door. Salt around the hearth. Prayers your own kind, not the church's spoken softly into a cup of tea before bed. But ghosts don't care for herbs, and guilt does not obey salt. Some nights you don't sleep at all. You sit by the fire with your shawl around your shoulders, watching the flame flicker, and try not to blink too long. Because if you do, you'll see her again. The girl who bled too much. The child who never breathed. The mother who held your hand and said, "Don't let me die," and then died anyway. You ask yourself, what more could I have done? You ask yourself, did I fail her? You ask yourself, am I good? And the silence does not answer. It just watches. You've tried to outrun the dreams. You've taken long walks, pushed your body until it gave out. You've fasted. You've drunk too much wine. You've tried to forget. But me, Maury, is stitched into your bones. It rises like steam when the air is warm. It drips like wax when the candle burns too low. And the worst dreams are not the ones with blood. They are the quiet ones. The ones where you sit beside a cradle, empty. Where you walk through the village and no one sees you. Where your hands are tied and someone else is in the room, catching the child, smiling, while you are locked outside. They are dreams of erasure, of being forgotten. Because deep down, under the guilt, under the grief, under the tired pride there, is fear. Fear that your work is invisible, that your nights meant nothing, that all the lives you helped begin will never remember the hands that welcomed them. You press your palm to your chest when that fear rises, as if your heartbeat can answer it. As if you can remind yourself, I was there. And that matters. Your apprentice hears you cry out one night. She rushes in, and you pretend you were just startled by the wind. She doesn't believe you, but she doesn't push. The next morning, she makes the tea stronger, warmer. She lays the cloth on your lap before you ask. She is learning. Not just the work, but the toll. You tell her, one night, staring into the fire, some memories stay longer than others. She says nothing, just sits beside you, quietly. It is the most comforting thing anyone has done in months. You realize then that maybe you aren't meant to silence the nightmares. Maybe you're meant to live alongside them. Not to forget, but to remember without breaking. To mourn without drowning. You begin to talk to the dreams when they come. Not aloud, just in your chest. You say, I remember you. I tried. I'm sorry. You were loved. And sometimes they soften. Not disappear. Never disappear. But soften. And when you wake, breathless, sweating, you feel your hand move muscle memory from years of labor and it rests against your heart. And you breathe. And you begin again. Because you always do. They always know when you're coming. Before you turn the corner, before your shawl catches the breeze, before your footsteps echo on the cobbled lane they know. It's in the air. Something about the sound of your walk. The way the earth feels heavier when you pass. The way silence follows you, like a well-trained dog. The children stop playing. The women at the well pause. The baker lowers his eyes. Not because you are fear, but because you are known. And knowing carries weight. You are the midwife. Not a healer. Not a saint. Not a witch. Just the one who comes when it hurts the most. The one who appears when blood is in the sheets and hope is running thin. The one who arrives with tired hands and a quiet voice and does not flinch. And because of that, because of all you've seen, all you know, all you carry, they do not meet your gaze unless they need to. You are necessary. But necessity is not warmth. It is not welcome. You walk through the village with purpose. Your satchel thumps softly against your hip. You smell of herbs and fire. Your shoes are worn. Your face is calm. And still, no one invites you in. Unless something is wrong. Unless someone is crying. Unless a baby is crowning. They say your name, oh, Nenli, when pain follows it. You've stopped taking it personally. Years ago, it hurt. The way friends became clients. The way neighbors averted their eyes. The way laughter died when you approached. Now you understand. You remind them of what they'd rather forget. Of how fragile life is. Of how thin the line between joy and grief. Of how much blood it takes to begin again. They don't hate you. They fear needing you. That's different. And still, they listen for your knock. They count on it. They teach their daughters how to open the door when you arrive. How to boil water. How to lay the cloth. How to be brave. They tell their sons to stay outside. Sometimes, when you walk by the blacksmith's, he nods once. You nod back. Sometimes, a woman in the market presses a turnip into your hand with UTA word. Sometimes, you see a child you once delivered, now walking, now laughing, now clutching a dolland. You feel something between pride and ache. Because you were there. And they will never know. You pass the church and cross yourself, not because of belief, but because it's expected. Because they're watching. Because being invisible is safer than being too known. At night, in your hut at the edge of the village, you light a candle and listen. For footsteps, for knocks, for wind carrying cries. You live alone. Not because you wanted to, but because your work requires silence. Not just for your sake, Boot, for theirs. If you laugh too loudly, they'll say you have no reverence. If you weep too openly, they'll say you're unstable. If you grow close to anyone, and then a birth goes wrong, Hale'll say it was personal. So you keep your heart folded up like a worn letter, tucked into your chest where no one sees. But you are not lonely. Lonely is something else. You are alone, yes, but you are full. Full of the women who have clutched your hands. Full of the babies you've held in the first seconds of life. Full of the mothers who kissed your knuckles when it was over. Full of the prayers whispered into your neck when the pain passed. You carry a whole village inside you. And still, the actual village pretends not to see you. Until they need you. You once passed by a woman who looked at you as if you were a ghost. Later that week, her daughter went into labor too early. She came to your door in the middle of the night, sobbing. You did not say, "I remember," you just opened the blocks. Door. Because that's what you do. Because you are not here for pride. You are here for service. And they know that. Even if they pretend not to. There is a kind of power in being the one they don't greet in the square, but whose name they whisper when the pain comes. There is a kind of freedom in walking the edge, close enough to serve, distant enough to survive. You are not the healer in their fairy tales. You are not the villain in their fears. You are the midwife. And that is both everything and nothing at all. Some evenings, your apprentice asks, "Do you miss being seen?" And you look at her and say, "I am always seen, just not always welcomed." She nods. She is learning. The village watches her too now. Wonders if she will grow into your role. Wonders if she has the quiet. The strength. The stomach. You do not tell them that strength has nothing to do with it. You do not tell them that half the time you are terrified. You do not tell them that bravery isn't loud, it's getting up again, even when your legs shake. They wouldn't understand. Or maybe they would. Maybe that's why they look away. Maybe seeing you means seeing the truth, that life is messy, that birth is dangerous, that death is close, and that the woman walking beside all three wears your face. So they nod. They offer a potato. They whisper thanks into the night. And when they see you pass, they listen to your footsteps, not because they love you, But because they know you are the sound of life continuing, you've learned to keep your voice soft and your eyes steady. But more than that, you've learned to keep secrets. You hold them in your body like you hold breath quietly, without drawing attention, until the moment passes. Until no one is looking. Until it's safe to exhale. Some secrets are small. A whispered confession during a long labor. A name never spoken aloud. A father whose face doesn't match the child's. A bruise on a woman's thigh she doesn't explain. You see it all. You say nothing. Not because you don't care, but because speaking it would change everything. Because truth, in your world, is not always welcome. Not when it's sharp. Not when it's real. You know that truth has been used as a weapon, and your hands are meant to heal. So you carry the truth inside you, like a buried ember. You've been called to back rooms, to barns, to forest edges. Not every labor is joyful. Some begin with shame. Some end with silence. You've helped girls who were too young to understand what was happening to them. You've caught children who were never meant to be named. You've cut cords quickly and wrapped bodies quietly and handed women tea so bitter it scorched the throat and whispered, "Drink. Please, drink." You've seen what happens when a woman cannot carry the child of a man she fears. You've seen what happens when love becomes violence. You've seen what happens when choice is not allowed, but consequence is guaranteed. And you've never told? Because you are not their judge. You are their witness. You once helped a woman deliver her 6th child in as many years. She was tired. Beyond tired. Her eyes had gone somewhere far away, even as she pushed. When it was over, he kissed her baby's forehead and turned to you with a look you'll never forget. You will never tell anyone how much I wanted to die, will you? You shook your head. You never did. You never will. Because that is the vow you madder not with words, but with years. You protect what others cannot carry. You know which women are trying again after 3 losses. You know which ones carry the weight of children buried quietly in unmarked places. You know which ones return to your door, eyes heavy, hands trembling, saying, "It happened again," and mean something that can't be said aloud. You know the difference between a miscarriage and something done on purpose. And you never ask. Because asking implies judgment. And you are not there to judge. You are there to help. You even keep the secrets. Hat belong to men. The merchant's wife who comes with bruises that match his hands. The priest's sister who begs you for something to bring on her bleeding after a moment of weakness. The young man who weeps outside your hut while his girl screams inside, and you pretend not to hear his prayer, "Please don't let the baby live." You hold those too. Because if you spoke them, the cost would fall on someone else. And you are tired of women paying the price for other people's sins. You keep a small chest beneath your bed. It holds cloths, herbs, a few notes scrawled in a language only you can read. It holds the tools of your trade, but also the tools of your silence. You never unlock it when someone else is in the room. Because even your apprentice does not need to know everything. Some secrets are not hers to carry. Not yet. She asks you once, "Do you ever feel heavy?" And you smile, tired. Only all the time. You do feel heavy, but not weighed down. More like solid, like a tree that has survived too many winters, like a stone by the river that remembers every foot that stepped over it, like something still standing. And when the wind comes, carrying rumors and suspicion and the threat of fire, you stay quiet. You say only what's needed, because you've seen what happens when midwives speak too freely. You've seen them dragged from homes, accused, tried, burned, not because they did wrong, but because they knew too much, because they carried too many truths, because they kept too many secrets. You know how dangerous it is to be a woman who knows things. So you do not tell them about the herbs that quiet the womb. You do not tell them about the signs you see in a mother's eyes. You do not tell them how many times you've lied to protect a life. You just keep walking, keep working, keep catching babies and holding pain and whispering comfort into ears that will never repeat what you said. You once helped a woman birth her child in silence. No one else knew she was pregnant. She left the village 2 days later. No one asked you about her. But when her sister came to you months later, bleeding and shaking, you gave her the same tea. You said nothing. But your eyes said, "I understand." And that was enough. Because silence, in your world, is not emptiness. It is safety. It is power. It is the only thing that cannot be taken from you. And so, you keep their secrets, not because you are hiding something, but because you are protecting everything. You never meant to become a teacher. You became a midwife because someone once handed you a cloth and said, "Hold this," because a life entered the world in front of you and you couldn't look away. Because need came before choice. And now, years later, you are the one handing the cloth. Your apprentice is not you. She is quieter in some ways, louder in others. She asks too many questions. Her hands tremble when they shouldn't, and stay too still when they shouldn't. But she watches. That's what matters. She watches everything. She watches how you knock 3 times before entering a house. How you put your satchel down by the hearth, never the bed. How you roll your sleeves before boiling the water, not after. She watches how you speak not to be heard, but to be received. She watches, and slowly she begins to echo you. You never call it teaching. You never say, "Do this," or "Remember that." Instead, you let her kneel beside you. Let her feel the weight of a belly ready to break. Let her hear the way a woman's breath changes just before the final push. Let her smell the mix of fear and fire and new life. Let her learn the rhythm of being needed. It is not a rhythm that can be written down. There is no book that can hold the tone of a woman's cry when something is wrong, but no one can say why. No lecture that explains the silence before a stillbirth. No diagram that captures how to cradle a body shaking from relief and grief at the same time. So you teach with presence, with patience, CE. With time, she burns the herbs once. You don't scold her. You let the room fill with bitterness. Let her cough. Let her see the mother's eyes water from the smoke. And then you quietly start again. Next time, she doesn't burn them. She places the cloths too far from the fire. You don't correct her. You wait. The warmth doesn't reach the woman's belly. You see her shiver. You watch your apprentice realize. She moves the cloth. She is learning. There are things you cannot teach her. You cannot teach her how to sit with failure, how to breathe through blame, how to hold a dead child and not let her soul break in half. Those things she will learn on her own. And when she does, you will be there. Not with answers, but with the knowing look that says, I've lived this too. Sometimes, shh. E asks why you never had children of your own. You smile. You say, I didn't need to, because you have hundreds. Some alive. Some not. Some who smile at you in the market. Some who only live in your dreams. She asks what to do if a mother is afraid. You say, sit close. Stay still. Let her know she's not alone. She asks what to do if the child doesn't breathe. You say, everything you can. And then, everything else. She asks, how will I know what to do? And you say, you won't. Until you do. You remember how it felt the first time someone trusted you to do it alone. The terror. The certainty that you would fail. The trembling hands. And then the baby in your arms, screaming and pink and perfect. You remember the way your knees gave out afterward. Not from exhaustion. From disbelief. You let her go through that. You don't save her from it. Because it's the fire she must pass through to see her own strength. You start letting her attend births without you. Small ones. Uncomplicated ones. You stay close. Not visible, but near enough to run if she calls. She never calls. She returns with blood on her sleeves and stars in her eyes. You don't tell her that those stars will fade. You let her shine while she can. You begin to show her your secrets, where the stronger herbs are kept, what the lines in a woman's nail beds can tell you, what it means when a mother hums to herself between contractions, how to speak when no one else will, how to listen even when no one is speaking. You give her the chest beneath your bed, the one with the herbs, the cloths, the notes written in your hand. You say, add your own, because this is not yours to keep. This work was never meant to live and die in one pair of hands. You realize, with a start, that one day she will walk into a room and someone will say, you are the midwife, not you, her, and you will be a memory. And that is how it should be. She once asks, when will I know I'm ready? You say, when you stop asking. She stops asking after the winter. One night, you wake to find her gone. She left to attend a birth. On her own. You sit in the dark and wait. Not with fear, but with something like peace. Because you've spent your life preparing someone to continue what you can't do forever. And now she is doing it. Not like you. Like her. And that's enough. When she returns at dawn, exhausted and radiant, you pour her tea and say nothing. She drinks it in silence. And in that moment, you know, she is ready. And so are you. It starts with a whisper. A child dies too soon, too quietly. The grief is raw, and grief always needs a shape. A name. A face to hold responsible. And they choose yours. You hear it first from a girl at the well. Her eyes flick toward you, then away. She doesn't speak. She doesn't have to. You've seen that look before. Something is coming. You walk home differently, now shoulders stiffer, ears sharper. You begin to notice who avoids you. Who stops greeting you in the street? Who crosses themselves when they think you aren't looking? You've done nothing wrong. But that no longer matters. Because this is not about truth. This is about fear. It's not the first time you've seen a woman accused. You've watched it happen to others. Midwives. Widows. Women with too much knowledge. Women with too few allies. You remember one. Years ago her herbs burned in the square, her hands tied, her mouth gagged while they spoke for her. Said she caused a miscarriage. Said she cursed a man's crops. Said she spoke to spirits. All she did was help. Just like you. They said she confessed. You know she didn't. Now it's your name being passed like a sickness. They say your teas are too strong. They say your silence means you have something to hide. They say your hands are stained with death. You want to scream. Of course they are. You have caught more babies than any priest has buried. You have pressed down on too many bleeding wombs. You have cut too many cords, washed too lifeless bodies. Of course, your hands are stained. But no one wants that kind of truth. They want clean stories, clean lines between good and evil. And a woman who knows what you know can never be seen as clean. You find dried rosemary scattered on your doorstep one morning. A warning or a curse. You sweep it away without a word. You begin locking your door at night. You stop walking through the village unless you must. You keep the fire low. Your apprentice watches you, confused, then afraid. She asks what's happening. You don't answer. You want to protect her from it, from the ugliness of it, from the truth that doing this work means walking a blade's edge between being needed and being feared. But you can't shield her forever. She sees it in your eyes. She starts to sleep with a K, knife under her pillow. Not because of ghosts, because of men. The accusation comes as it always does, sudden, final, public. They call a meeting in the churchyard. You are not invited. You go anyway. They say you caused a miscarriage. They say you gave a woman herbs without permission. They say you whispered things into a baby's ear before it cried. You say nothing. Because there is no defense. Because they have already decided. The priest asks if you renounce your ways. You want to ask him what ways he means. The ways that saved his sister. The ways that kept the baker's third son alive when he was born too soon. The ways that pulled the blacksmith's wife back from death when the blood wouldn't stop. But you stay silent. You bow your head. You do not plead. Because you know this. They see www and take your name. They can take your herbs. They can take your body. But they cannot take the hands of the woman standing behind you. She is watching. Your apprentice. Her eyes blazing. And that is enough. You are summoned again. To answer to the elders, to recite prayers, to confess. You do what they ask, not because you believe in their power, but because you understand survival. You burn a few herbs yourself, the useless ones, to show obedience. You give them names of teas that soothe but do not help. You tell them, I will not do harm, and you mean it. They let you go, not because they believe you, but because they still need you, because someone will give birth next week. Someone will bleed. Someone will beg for help. And when they do, they will still knock on your door. But, thin, GS are different now. You do not walk alone anymore. Your apprentice stays close. Not because she's afraid, but because she's angry. She starts to speak when you won't. She corrects the men in the square. She names your work as holy. You tell her to be careful. She says, you weren't. You almost smile. Because maybe that's what teaching was for. Not to make another you, but to make someone braver. You begin to speak quietly to the others. The seamstress, the widow, the farmer's daughter. You give them herbs for pain, for sleep, for bleeding that won't stop. You show them how to grind bark into powder. You teach them to listen to the body's stories. You plant something, not herbs. Truth. You realize they can't stop you. Not really. Because your name is not just yours now. It lives in other mouths. In other hands. You were the midwife. And they may fear you, but they cannot unmake you. At some point, you stop counting, not because the numbers don't matter, but because they start to blur. The faces, the names, the cries they weave together into one long, trembling thread of life, one that stretches behind you like a shadow too long to measure. You don't remember the first time it happened, when the tally slipped from your fingers. When the list of babies you caught, mothers you soothed, losses you buried, grew too long to hold in one mind. You just woke one morning and couldn't remember the name of the boy born in the blue cottage last winter. You could see his face. You could hear his first breath. But his name was gone. And instead of feeling shame, you felt peak. Because it meant you'd done enough. Enough to fill a book no one will write. Enough to become part of something larger than memory. Still, you remember some. You remember the baby girl with the extra toe who looked around the room as if judging it. You remember the boy born in silence, who gasped only when you sang. You remember the mother who died smiling, whispering, tell him I tried. You remember the twins who arrived on the coldest night of the year, and how they clung to each other like promises. But for every story you remember, there are 20 you don't. And that's how it should be. Because you were never meant to keep them all. You were only meant to carry them across. You once tried to keep a record. Scraps of parchment, tied bundles of names and dates, but the ink smudged. The pages grew damp. The candle burned one. You took it as a sign. Now your record is in your bones, in the curve of your spine, in the ache of your joints, in the quiet rhythm of your breath at the end of a long night. They say that legacy is what is left behind. But sometimes legacy is what you lose to make space for what comes next. You visit a market one day and see a girl selling bread. She's tall now, braided hair, laughs like her mother used to. You helped her into the world, but she doesn't know. She hands you a coin as change. You hold it like a relic, not because it's valuable, but because she is. You nod to her and walk away, and she never knows. And that's enough, because this work was never about being remembered. It was about being there. You remember one night when a woe man gave birth under a sky so clear you could count every star. She reached out and held your wrist and said, "You are the first face she'll ever see." Thank you, and you wept. Because most don't say it. Because you don't need them to. But when it comes, it feels like a balm. Your apprentice asks you once, "Do you remember every birth?" You say, "No. Only the ones that broke me, and the ones that saved me." And then she asks, "Which ones saved you?" You think about it. Long and hard. And then you realize the answer is all of them. Every cry. Every breath. Every small, wrinkled body that slid into your hands. Every moment you stood between life and loss. They kept you going. They gave you purpose. Even when no one clapped. Even when no one came. You used to keep the cloths from birth. That went wrong. A kind of mourning. You buried them quietly. Said a prayer. Now you burn them. Let the smoke rise. Let the sky take them. Let them go. You've learned that grief is not always heavy. Sometimes it's smoke. Light, bitter, gone too fast. And sometimes it's a baby's name you can't remember, even though you loved them. And that too is holy. You sit by the fire one evening, holding your satchel. You run your fingers over the worn strap, the frayed edge, the stitching you repaired, again and again. It is soft now, shaped to your body. You wonder who will carry it next. You begin to forget the seasons, the year. You know time only by the colour of the sky when the knock comes. Dark, then it's late. Bright, then you've overslept. You count time in contractions, in cries, in tea, he silence after. You once thought you'd remember every birth. You were wrong, but you were never supposed to. You were not a book. You were a bridge. And a bridge does not remember each traveller. It just stays steady until they reach the other side. You feel it before it happens, not as a thought, not as a voice, just a weight in your chest, quiet and still, like a door closing gently somewhere behind you. You are sitting by the fire when the knock comes. It's late. The kind of late that makes the sky ink black and the wind sound like a whisper. Your apprentice stirs, but you touch her arm and say, "Sleep. This one is mine." You rise slowly. Your knees argue with the cold. Your shoulders complain as you lift the satchel. The strap digs into your collarbone like an old memory. But you alk, because you always have. The path is one you know by heart. Past the well, past the mill, past the crooked tree that looks like it's always leaning toward the road. Your breath clouds in front of you. Your feet crunch against frost, and your heart beats with a rhythm you do not name. When you arrive, the house is warm but tense. A woman is on the bed, legs drawn, sweat on her forehead. Her eyes flick to you like someone spotting land after a long storm. You nod. You don't say, "I'm here." You don't have to. They all leave the room, except the woman's mother. She stays at the corner, wringing a cloth in her hands. You set your satchel down. Light a candle. Place your palm on the mother's belly. The baby shifts beneath your touch. Strong, but turned. You breathe through your teeth. Not impossible. Not yet. You begin slowly guiding her breath, helping her shift her body, massaging the hips, loosening the muscles. You whisper old words. The kind with no translations. Just syllables worn smooth by centuries of fear and hope. She cries out, answer sharp, "Hi." Her mother starts to move toward her. You lift a hand without looking. Stay. The labor goes long. Longer than expected. You lose count of the hours. The candle burns down. You replace it. The fire dims. Someone stirs it. The woman begins to say names. Her own mother. A child she once lost. A brother gone to war. Her husband, over and over. You let her. Pain has its own language. You speak it fluently. You feel your own body screaming beneath the calm. Your hips ache. Your back tightens. Your feet are numb. Still, yo. You, stay close. You hold her through the peaks. You guide her through the valleys. And when the baby crowns, you are already their hands steady, eyes sharp. The child comes slowly. The room holds its breath. And then a cry. Not loud, not long, but real. The woman sobs. You lift the child to her chest. She curls around it like a closing flower. The mother in the corner drops the cloth. You don't cry, but your throat tightens, because something inside you whispers, "That was the last." You clean up quietly. No one thanks you. They're too busy staring at the new life. Rightfully so. You pack your satchel. Wrap the used cloths. Reknot the twine. Tuck away the herbs. You glance back once. The baby's eyes are open, watching you. You nod, and then you leave. Outside, the sky is beginning to pale. Dawn. You walk home slower than usual. Not because you're tired though you are, but because everything feels like it deserves a second glance. The crooked tree, the well, the frost on the windows. You wonder how many times you've walked this path. How many times the sun has risen on your aching feet and blood-soaked skirt. At home, your apprentice is waiting. She doesn't ask how it went. She sees it in your face. You sit by the fire, unstrap the satchel, place it on the floor beside you, and then for the first time in years, you let yourself fall asleep before cleaning it. When you wake, the light is golden. Your apprentice has brewed tea. She hands you a cup. You sip. It's perfect. You look at her, really look, and you see the midwife. Not becoming. Already there. You say, "Next time, yo." You go. She nods. And so it ends not with a ceremony. Not with a tearful farewell. Not with an announcement. Just a shift. Like the tide pulling back from the shore. And you? You rest. Not forever. Just enough. No one will write your name in a book. There will be no statue. No inscription. No painted portrait hanging on a noble wall. No songs sung in your memory, no holy day marked with candles. But you were here, and that is enough. Because what you leave behind cannot be carved in stone. It cannot be measured in lines or listed on parchment. It lives in breath, in instinct, in hands that remember what yours once knew. Your apprentice works alone now. She leaves at night, just like you did. She returns at dawn, her hair damp with sweat, her eyes shining with something more than sleep. S. He smells of herbs and ash and newborns. You recognize that smell. It used to follow you, too. You don't tell her she's doing well. You don't need to. She knows. Because your lessons are no longer words. They are rhythm, repetition, legacy. She boils the water before you suggest it. She lifts the pot off the fire just as it starts to sing. She folds the cloths into neat squares without thinking. She cradles the babies as if she's held 1,000 already. She will teach others in time. And they will teach more. And your name? It will be there. Not spoken, but present. In every birth, attended by hands steady and sure. In every quiet moment between pain and peace. In every woman who survives because someone stayed. Your hut stands as it always has, crooked, sturdy, warm. The fire still burn. S. The shelves still hold their jars. The old satchel rests on a hook now, empty but honoured. The air smells of thyme and smoke and tea. Sometimes women still come to you, not to birth, but to speak, to cry, to remember. You pour tea. You listen, and they leave a little lighter. That, too, is midwifery. The work never truly stops. It only shifts. You still wake at strange hours. But now, it's not because someone knocked. It's because the stars are bright. The wind speaks. Your bones ache in familiar ways. You sit by the fire and close your eyes. And the memories common sharp, not sorrowful, just soft. You see a woman smiling through tears, whispering a name into the dark. You see a man holding his newborn, like it might break and glow at the same time. You see a baby blinking for tea. He first time, the light catching in its eyes like a promise. You do not remember the numbers. You remember the moments. The feel of life beginning. The sound of relief. The breath after the cry. You are not young anymore. Your body speaks in aches, in pauses, in quiet refusals. But your spirit feels full. Not done, just full. You have given everything, and what you've given cannot be taken. You think of all the women who came before you, the ones who birthed without walls, the ones who whispered in caves, in tents, in fields, the ones whose hands first held pain and called it purpose. You are one of them. You always were. You light one last candle. Watch it flicker. You whisper the old words, not for anyone else, just for yourself. A goodbye. A thank you. A homecoming. Outside, the world continues. A baby is born, a mother weeps, a midwife knocks, and in that motion, in that cycle you remain, because your legacy is not a monument, it is a heartbeat, passed from hand to hand, quiet, steady, eternal. You were not remembered in history, but you were remembered in life, and life is the only thing that ever mattered.